because of a sad incident yesterday afternoon. In fact, I requested the Vice Chancellor and the Registrar whether I can also speak online from Nujvedu, like Professor Tilak, but he insisted that I should be physically present. Therefore, I am here. And they promised me that I will leave at 11 a.m., but I think it's already 11 a.m. And therefore, although I wanted to speak for about 30 minutes, but I will try to, some of you, I repeatedly tell my young friends that there is a saying in ONGC, if you can't strike a chord in 10 minutes, you can strike it. You can never strike it. So if you want to convey, you cannot convey something that you wish to convey in 10 minutes, that you will never be able to convey it. And before that, my apologies to my friends, Professor Chandraya, Professor Vijay Krishna Reddy, and Professor Sujan Iyer for denying them the opportunity of interacting with you in the inaugural function. My apologies to all the three of you. I know I am not a good substitute for you, but then for the courtesy of being a guest, naturally the university thought that the chief guest need to be given preference over the local guests. I thank the university and in particular Professor Sudarshan Rao for this wonderful opportunity given to me to share a few of my thoughts on new education policy, in particular, and higher education in the context of universities like Vikram Sundarpuri University. I would say, discussing any document, any piece of legislation, without either the context or without even looking at the purpose for which you are discussing it in vacuum, it will not give you any outcome. That's why new education policy is a departure. India is not dearth of education policies or committees. We have had a number of, I don't think any other country have had so many policies and committees on education and also on higher education. We started with Radhakrishnan Commission, and even before the new education policy, the same NDA government had one Subramanian committee, and as my good friend Dr. Madhumati was reflecting, the landmark was the 1986 education policy, which laid in fact the foundation for modern higher education in particular. But then since 1986 and 2020-21, well, a lot of things have undergone structural phenomenal changes. So therefore what you thought in 1986 may not be appropriate, may not be relevant. So if you are talking about new education policy, let us in brief, but you have read a lot of material on new education policy, and the Vice Chancellor himself narrated in detail on some of the salient aspects of the new education policy. I don't want to repeat them again, but I would only state, underline 2-3 important aspects of new education policy, which are significantly, or I would even call them, departure from the earlier education commissions and policy. One, it is more outcome oriented rather than input based. education in general, higher education in particular, need to be contextualized, needs to be implemented, need to be developed, not just in terms of input, but largely taking into consideration the outcome. Ultimately, the society would look at outcome. If you are doing something, then you look at what is the outcome. If you are starting your day to day, at the end of the day, you come back and ask yourself, what is it that I have done? What is the outcome of my work? So it is a departure. Second thing is, notwithstanding what we are talking about technology, the new education policy talks about teacher as central focus of education. You call it teacher centric. And they also say that while reflecting on quality and equity, there is a dilemma, which one comes first? We have been talking about access, equity, quality. A number of ways of defining quality. There are some studies which say that access is more important than quality. Some studies that say that quality is more critical than access. There is no point in providing access without quality. But new education policy reflects saying that quality not precedes access, but follows access. So it is something like build capacity, provide opportunity, and then work on what you call quality parameters. If you say that we will build on quality and then think of access, well, generations of people will be denied of that opportunity. Now this is the second one. The third one is the unflinching commitment towards public education. Now it's here that the present AP government, whether you talk in terms of Nadu Nedu, or you talk in terms of providing various support schemes towards education. You must have seen 2 days ago the budget focus after agriculture, it is education. Education receiving the primary focus. So long and short of the story is, new education policy is comprehensive. It is not compartmentalized. It talks more about the primary education, secondary education, talks less about higher education in fact. If you look at the document, not even 1/4 of the document is devoted for higher education. Large part of it, because it realizes the fact that unless you build the base properly, there is no way you can build a quality and sustainable superstructure. You will only at best have a fragile superstructure. And that's the reason why they were articulating on the basic education, that they have even gone beyond the basic education, even towards Anganwadis. So we do not have either the focus of the seminar is not on those issues, the focus is basically on 2-3 important aspects of higher education. Now, when you talk about higher education and new education policy, you need to contextualize it. What is the context in which you are reflecting and discussing this? 2-3 things. Number one, if you are talking about India, or if you are talking about Vikramsimhapuri University, when Vikramsimhapuri University was started during 1986-87, many people were skeptic and many even ridiculed it. They even told me, what is it that you are trying to do? You are saying that every district should have a university. I told them, you people will realize that's where I would always call Dr. Rajasekhar Reddy as a visionary leader. A visionary leader is one who looks into the future, not for tomorrow. That's why I think if some of you have gone through a famous saying of the Chinese philosopher, I think it is very appropriate to, for want of time, I thought I should not get into those things, but then I thought it's very appropriate. He said, if you are looking for an ear, plant rice. If you are looking for 10 years, plant a tree. If you are looking for generations, educate children. Education, therefore, is something that would empower the society. That is what Dr. YSR was looking at. His vision was that anybody who is willing to study, I think some of my friends in the audience, the girls particularly, they would not have gone into higher education if Vikram Sivapuri is not here. I am very sure about it. The parents were not willing, when I was discussing about these things, many parents were not willing to send their children away home for studies, although they were very eager that their children should also study higher education. So whether it was fee reimbursement, starting new universities, it was all visualized in that context. The second objective was that the district or regional university should partner with regional development, should become stakeholders in the development of the region. Each university must conceptualize, reflect on what is happening in that region, what are the compulsions, what are the aspirations, what are the complexities, what are the problems, and then study them, if possible, provide inputs to the policy, to the district level, and if also necessary to the state level. So it was not that it was done in haste, it was done with a lot of homework, and along with Vikram Sivapuri University, 14 other universities, nowhere in the country, in public sector, 14 universities have come into existence in one go. And that was the visionary leader of late Dr. YSR. And fortunately for the young people of the state, his son and the dynamic Chief Minister, Dr. Sri Y.S. Jagannath Reddy, is also looking at education with the same perspective, with the same acclaim and acceptance. Having said that, I'll come back to the macro context. The one is India is a young country. Every year, 140 million students will be entering into what you call the age group of people who would like to study, college going age group, 140 million. To meet this 140 million, you need lot more universities. You need lot more colleges. You have one supply side, the other side demand side. Now starting a university or a college is not just a matter of giving some money, building, constructing building, but what you need is more importantly, the faculty. That's why I said NEP, the centrality of NEP is teacher-centered. Can you believe the amount of or number of teachers who are required to address the challenge? Not a lakh, not 10 lakh, 45 lakh teachers are required. In 45 lakh, at least 25% of them must have PhDs. Well, you need to address this. The challenge of the new education policy, not in formulating a policy, more importantly, its implementation, its execution. That's where you need to really involve the stakeholders, discuss with them, fortunately or unfortunately. In the modern world, discussions and deliberations have become very uncommon. Decisions are taken, sweeping decisions sometimes are taken without deliberations or discussions. Also in education, if you don't involve, that's why I would say, any decision that you take, if you don't involve the stakeholder, implementation becomes extremely difficult. Because the execution has to be done by the people at the ground level. Not by people sitting in Delhi or sitting in Hyderabad or in Amaravati. You need to implement them in Nellore. Somebody need to implement them in Guntur. Somebody in Kadapa. So that's where I think involving the stakeholders. And stakeholders include the teacher, the student, the community at large. That's the first thing. The second thing is the context of new education policy. What should be the kind of universities and colleges that should be started? Should we reflect in terms of, as again, new education policy is innovative. Now, having realized the fact that the global education systems are moving from unidimensional to multidimensional or interdisciplinary, they have said unequivocally that education must become more multidimensional. We have not had 20 years ago a subject called biomedical engineering. But there were days when we were looking at engineering in isolation, medicine isolation. We are now trying to combine medicine with engineering. If you are trying to combine medicine with engineering, why are you separating engineering from humanities and social science? I am extremely happy that Chief Minister Jagan Mohan Reddy recently mentioned that we should start a quality degree college in humanities and social sciences on par with Delhi School of Philosophy. I think we need to realize at some point of time the role of humanities and social sciences. Because an engineer or a doctor without a societal perception will be out like fish out of water. He will not be able to address the challenges of the community and society. That's what is needed. So education needs to be multidimensional, interdisciplinary. That's why university by definition, a university in terms of even dictionary meaning, is not an isolated attempt to develop one faculty or one department. It has to be unique. Look at IITs. IITs are starting medical programs. IITs are starting economics programs, philosophy programs. And we are now asking the engineering colleges to get rid of some of the humanities and social sciences. So you need to build that. That's the second one. The third thing is quality. How do you define quality? Is it always in relation to employment? Or should it also reflect simultaneously a mixture of employment focus and what you call giving the right kind of values, cultural ethos in order to make somebody a responsive citizen? Is it not possible for you to simultaneously evolve a pedagogy where you bring in these elements simultaneously with a view like for instance 30 years, 40 years ago there were no skill development programs. We were all studying, people were getting into financial services, people were getting into, even today look at the American education system, the European education system. One need not study biology to become a doctor. One could be an economist, an economics graduate, but could still become a doctor. Now this is all because the perception with which you are redefining. If you have the ability to study, if you have the capacity to absorb, if you have the desire to learn, well, from where you come is immediate. So therefore you need to look at it. But what happens ultimately is, if you start focusing only on employable skills, you will only be creating a lopsided human resource. A human resource which is more like a machine, not a human being. So do you want your education to create machines or human beings? Or you want your education to create a human being who can also work simultaneously as a machine? Even for a machine to become operational, you need a person. That's the reason why education, you need to, whether you like it or not, the centrality of education is teacher-centered. The last and most important one is, or the other one which I thought I should reflect upon before I sign off. The one other thing is, in the context of globalization, can we say where we are now thinking in terms of 50%, there's a conflict. We are now asking for 50% gross enrollment. On the one hand, you say that there is high level of unemployability, underemployment. A PhD is working for 5,000 rupees a month. And some PhDs, even for 5,000 rupees, they are unable to get jobs. Why are you producing PhDs? And many graduates are not finding jobs. Why are you producing graduates? Now this is one side of the story. The other side is you are saying that you want to increase 50% of gross enrollment. But that's where I think you need to raise this question and seek answers. So unless you look at them critically, you will not be able to come up with what I would call the kind of answers that you are looking for. So whether you look at over the years what happened in the public sector, what happened in the private sector. For many years, unfortunately, there was no recruitment in the universities. There was no recruitment in the colleges. And you name it, you have all kinds of teachers in the university. You have regular, you have contract, you have guest, you have ad hoc, you have consultants, you have all kinds of faculty. I was talking to somebody and he was, what is this? What's happening in the universities and colleges in India? What kind of? But then unfortunately, in our anxiety to implant the Western education model of contractual system, we have not evolved a contractual system that has sustainability. Look at the Western contractual system. They have a contractual system and they say that you are appointed on a contract basis for 5 years. It's a tenure appointment. You are assessed. After your assessment, if you are found appropriate, you are absorbed, you are made permanent. Now we have in most of the universities, and not only in this state, across the country, people are at the verge of retirement still working as consultants, contract employees. Look at their pay, the family. And then what kind of accountability you expect from them? And you can't really expect what you are thinking of a faculty to contribute in a sustainable manner for development of human resources. So public versus private, the debate is ongoing. And it has the other dimension of globalization and commoditification of higher education. I think Mr. Tilak will reflect more on this issue, commoditification, globalization, how and why Indian higher education is getting into lots of problems into these contexts. But we need to take a conscious decision. Finally, we have autonomy versus accountability. Institutions must look always for autonomy. Teachers must look for autonomy. But autonomy without accountability will only contribute to irresponsibility. You may not be accountable to your head of the department, your principal, your vice chancellor. You are accountable to yourself. As long as somebody can always reflect when he or she goes back home, have I earned my salary today? Well, that itself is a big way that people can build what we call self-consciousness in what they are doing. Are we making ourselves accountable? So before you ask for autonomy, you need to make yourself accountable. That's the reason why new education policy is thinking in terms of reviewing the entire institutional, infrastructural ecosystem, regulatory mechanism. But as a person involved in education for quite some time, I feel that in our anxiety to bring in a highly regulated regime, let us not bring into the arena what I would call a throat-choking regulatory mechanism which prohibits invention and innovation. Ultimately, inventions and innovations are critical to sustainability of education. Building research universities is always a desire. But again, don't separate research from teaching. Institutions like Indian Institute of Science, which has excelled in research, is also excelling in teaching. If you look at any university across the world, MIT, Stanford, private universities like Carnegie Mellon, they all excel in research, they also excel in Chicago School, excellent research, also excellent teaching. Delhi School, Bombay School, excellent research, also excellent teaching. So therefore, you need to really think in terms of, like you reflect in terms of a multidimensionality, you also reflect in terms of teaching and research, not as watertight compartment, but integral part of the whole system. Thank you very much.